If you thought King Viserys talking to a 12-year-old was bad, then...
Honey, you've got a big storm coming.
Episode 4 of House of the Dragon is here with all the heartwarming family drama we've come to expect.
I'm sorry, what is that?
Tea, Princess.
This video is a non-spoiler deep dive into the episode, lore, and connections to Game of Thrones, so join me in my pillow house and make sure to like and subscribe. This one's gonna get weird. We open on that Valyrian steel necklace Rhaenyra was gifted from Prince Daemon in episode 1. Not only does this act as foreshadowing for what's to come, but I think it's pretty telling that Rhaenyra has all these suitors lined up for her, yet she insists on holding an object given to her by her uncle. Although never explicitly stated, we are likely at Storm's End, the seat of House Baratheon. Notice the circular shape of the room, which may be the massive drum tower described in Fire and Blood. It is said that the castle is protected by spells woven into the very walls to prevent magic from passing through it. Next to the princess is Bormund Baratheon, who you'll remember asked for Rhaenys' favor at the tournament in episode 1, and who also swore allegiance to the king and Rhaenyra as heir. Rhaenyra's father, King Viserys, set up a grand tour spanning several months, which will take the princess across the realm in search of a suitable husband. Last episode, the king told her that she must marry, but gave her the option of choosing this man herself, but as we'll find out, it seems no one has caught her eye. Lining up like sheep to the slaughter are several houses. We can see House Tully, Swan, who we heard last episode lost Lady Joanna and the Stepstones and sold to a pillow house, House Frey, we remember those guys, Mud, and Strong. We met two new members of House Strong last episode, Harwin and Loras, with their father being the current Master of Laws on the Small Council. Making his case as the princess's future Casanova is a fossil by the name of Lord Dondarrion. This is particularly interesting because Sir Criston Cole's father serves under this house. You may recall the Dondarrion line from Game of Thrones where we met Lord Beric Dondarrion and his flaming sword. When he's not having to quench his thirst with some Metamucil, Lord Dondarrion recounts that Rhaenyra's great-grandmother, Queen Alysanne, once remarked that the marches, where the seat of Dondarrion is located, were beautiful. Queen Alysanne was the wife of King Jaehaerys, who we saw briefly in episode 1. And honestly, Rhaenyra is kind of a royal bitch, making a fool of Dondarrion in front of all the other lords. Even Bormund turns is like, yo, you might want to turn that down. I'm pretty sure Lord Dondarrion will remember this moment should the princess's claims to succession ever be questioned. As they say, a lord spurned is a lord burned. I just made that up, I apologize. And from one end of the age spectrum, we come to the other. A boy from House Blackwood slides into Rhaenyra's DMs extolling the size of his house's army, and that by marrying him, she'd be marrying someone with the blood of the first men flowing through his veins. The First Men were considered the first of three major ethnic groups of human that set foot in Westeros, the other being the Rhoynar and Andals. This kid's great-great-grandfather helped Aegon the Conqueror in his quest to conquer Westeros, aid which this Emil Hirsch-looking character makes fun of. This is a member of House Bracken over at the Riverlands. If we look at our map, you can see Stonehenge, where House Bracken makes its home, is right near Raventree Hall, where House Blackwood is located, so it's very likely there is some history between these two houses that goes beyond these minor jokes. The two actually end up fighting, and in the melee, Rhaenyra makes her escape. They are expected in Bitterbridge in 3 days' time, but Rhaenyra wants to go home, cutting her grand tour to find a husband by 2 whole months, something that her father won't be too pleased about. Note to self, this is not why you pick on the little guy. Off the coast of King's Landing, Rhaenyra prepares for her arrival. She's rejected more suitors than a season of The Bachelorette. Hot off his victory at the Stepstones, Daemon swoops in on Caraxes, knocking Rhaenyra over. Even though her noggin gets a flogging, she can't help but be mesmerized by her uncle, an uncle she wouldn't have seen for several years. This is gonna be more awkward than my family's Thanksgiving. In the realm's biggest dick swinging contest in decades, Viserys prepares to meet his brother, donning his crown and Valyrian steel broadsword Blackfyre. Rhaenyra is the only one to follow alongside him through the crowd as he makes his entrance, which I thought was pretty interesting. Not to be outdone, Daemon too has a crown, one that looks to be made by my niece during craft time. But Daemon also brings with him Craghas Drahar's hammer, the one he used to nail his victims along the beach. And in a total badass move, Daemon tells his brother to add it to his chair.
Add it to the chair.
Daemon has not come to challenge his brother, but to offer his crown and the Stepstones, to which he was made king by Lord Corlys. These lands never officially belonged to Daemon, they were always the crown's, so this is largely symbolic of Daemon trying to mend the relationship between he and his brother. After all, winning the Stepstones was never really about the land, but to prove that he could do this without the help of his brother. Of particular note are these cutaways to Otto, who watches the scene intently. Daemon is a chaotic force at King's Landing, and one could even argue that if it weren't for him coming back, Otto would still be Hand of the King, so it's in Otto's best interest that the king and his brother remain apart. Absent is Lord Corlys Velaryon, still pouting over the fact that King didn't marry his 12-year-old daughter. Corlys too got what he wanted out of the Stepstones, secure trade routes through the Narrow Sea upon which his fortune was built. The scene ends with the two brothers hugging in front of the court, with the king telling him in front of everyone that the realm owes him a great debt. For Daemon, this is all he's ever wanted, to be loved and at his brother's side. And oh, that will be short-lived. Daemon's celebration is taken outside, where Viserys talks about how their mother always liked Daemon more. He was a great warrior, while Viserys was one to abide by rules and tradition. And what family reunion isn't without its awkward banter when Alicent suggests Daemon view the new tapestries from Novos and Qohor, two of the 9 free cities on the continent of Essos. It really shows how little Alicent knows about her brother-in-law. In fact, in the books, Daemon didn't even attend their wedding. Speaking of Alicent, we'll see that she's no longer pregnant as she was last episode, having already given birth to her second child, Helaena. Rhaenyra excuses herself to sit alone just like me at lunch in high school. Alicent, or should I say her stepmom, has come to see how her tour went. It must be nice to have all the men of the realm fawning over her, but for Rhaenyra, it's all a farce. All she's wanted for is her name and Valyrian blood, with Rhaenyra stating that it's not romantic to be confined to a castle squeezing out heirs, something she soon realizes is exactly what Alicent is going through. The two realize they aren't too different after all. Both feel like their lives are out of their hands, and both have few friends. They both miss each other, and it seems like this is the first step toward them reconciling. Sometime later, after the party is cleared out, Rhaenyra talks to her uncle for the first time since their precarious meeting at Dragonstone some years ago. Daemon has come back to enjoy the comforts of home, which likely include frequenting the various brothels at King's Landing. His war in the Stepstones seemed to have put an end at the prospects of marriage with Mysaria, who we'll see again in a little bit. In Daemon, Rhaenyra finds someone to vent to. She laments being sold off to whichever lord has the biggest castle, to which Daemon replies,
"There are worse things to be sold for."
This might be a slight jab at his own wife, Rhea Royce, who he was married off to. He had no say in this marriage, an arrangement which was put together by his grandmother. Now he calls his wife the Bronze Bitch, named after the ancient bronze armor their Royce family are known for. For Daemon, marriage is but a political tool. Once married, he can go off and fool around with anyone he so desires, but for women, it's a death sentence. Rhaenyra won't subject herself to the same fate as her mother, who, in an effort to produce a male, conceived so many times that it killed her. But Rhaenyra can't go on living in fear, or else she'll forsake the best parts of living. It's essentially Daemon setting her up to be even more rebellious, something that we'll definitely see later on in the episode. The small council has convened, and you'll notice 2 new additions. Rhaenyra has a seat at the table. It looks like she's no longer the cupbearer. We also see Tyland Lannister has taken over Corlys's seat as Master of Ships. Speaking of Corlys, there is some concerning news. Otto was sent word from Oldtown that Lord Corlys plans to marry Laena off to a Sea Lord of Braavos, the wealthiest and most powerful of the free cities. If this were to occur, the Targaryens would need to enter into their own marriage pact to counter this potential threat. This will undoubtedly put even more pressure on Rhaenyra to wed. As night descends upon the Red Keep, the servants of the castle make their nightly rounds. Sir Criston stands guard outside Rhaenyra's chambers, but as the princess ventures inside, she notices a strange bag filled with boys' clothes and a note. "If I ever found that in my room, I'd be checking behind the drapes to make sure the subway guy wasn't around." Written in High Valyrian is a drawing of a secret passageway. The Red Keep was known to have several of these, and I guess we'll just have to buy into the fact that Rhaenyra has likely been in this room for her whole life and never noticed this giant secret door that leads to the cellars where Balerian's skull resides. Daemon has been waiting. He's also disguised as they descend the debaucherous Street of Silk, known for its pleasure houses and street performers who don't care if they singe your eyebrows off. This is my favorite dude.
You wish to know your death, child?
She's highly rated on Yelp. Juxtaposing this adventurous night out is Queen Alicent with her lesion-covered husband in the bath. I'd hate to be the servant who has to clean that out. It really looks like his mysterious illness has progressed. Although this was seen last episode, he has lost at least 2 of his fingers. Back with whom Daemon calls the small folk, basically Westeros' version of peasants or the common people, Rhaenyra watches a play about the royal succession. This will have been one of the first times she's been exposed to the harsh realities of the outside world, watching as the commoners jest and boo her. The whole sequence reminded me of that scene in Game of Thrones where Arya watches a play about King Joffrey's death. That occurred in Braavos, and at least women were allowed to act in it, whereas the play Rhaenyra watches, all the female roles are played by men, which is something that was actually done in Shakespearean times. Daemon is kind of enjoying watching her niece take this in. She's been in her own protective bubble her entire life, and if she is to be the queen, knowing the pulse of the common folk is a trait that would surely come in handy. He tells her that many of the small folk believe a male should be king, to which she retorts,
Their wants are of no consequence.
if this is how she really thinks, what will this say about how she'll rule? Rhaenyra openly takes food off a street seller's tray, not knowing that you're to pay them beforehand. Her whole life she's never had to pay for anything. She runs off with Daemon in pursuit, bumping into a member of the City Watch who recognizes her as the princess. He also sees that she's with Daemon, and these two likely are buds considering Daemon used to be commander of the City Guard and even had a loyal contingent of them when he took Dragonstone. Alicent is called to the king's chambers to perform her royal duty of pleasing that booty. It's a stark contrast to Rhaenyra's escapades and paints a pretty grim picture that even though the queen is one of the most powerful people in the realm, she is also a prisoner. Daemon takes Rhaenyra to any normal place you'd take your niece, a brothel, where he states this is a place where people come to take what they want. He's just full of great advice. As the two make their way deeper into the den, he takes off her disguise. Surely he realizes people will notice the well-known prince and the princess, but there's 2 things at play here. One, he's insanely drunk, and deep down, I don't think he really cares. Remember that he just told his niece to take whatever the hell she wants. The two end up making out, but when things are about to take the path of no return, Daemon storms off, leaving Rhaenyra all alone, like me on prom night. Outside the brothel, a little boy spy takes note of Rhaenyra's presence. This boy works for a woman named the White Worm, who we'll find out is Mysaria. Spies are common all around King's Landing and beyond. Both Varys and Petyr Baelish use spies for their own political gain, so it seems Mysaria too is using this, later informing Otto Hightower of the princess's escapades. Rhaenyra returns through the front door of her chambers, surprising Sir Criston, who was tasked with protecting her. She's this young girl who was just taken on this extremely sexual experience and blue-balled, so it's no wonder when she gets home and there's this hunky knight she's been fawning over for years standing right there that she makes her move. Daemon told her, after all, to take what she wants. At first, Criston is like,
Well, this is risky business.
but ultimately he succumbs and she loses her virginity. This is also a huge breach of his oath as a Kingsguard. He is to act respectably and not engage in sexual affairs, let alone with the woman you're sworn to protect. The book offers differing accounts on what happened this fateful evening. One is from Septon Eustace, who writes that Sir Eric Cargill of the Kingsguard caught Daemon and the princess in bed together, with Rhaenyra pleading to her father that she was in love with her uncle and that they should leave and marry. The other is more in line with what occurs in the show, with some minor differences. In this scenario, Daemon finds out that Rhaenyra is in love with Sir Criston and takes her to the Street of Silk to learn about lovemaking, and then Rhaenyra comes back offering her virginity to Sir Criston, but in the book version he's horrified by her proposition and declines. I definitely like the way the show handled this because it leaves room for so much spicy drama in the episodes to come. With an engagement on the way, will Sir Criston and Rhaenyra's love affair continue, or will one of them put a stop to it? At some sort of inn slightly more luxurious than a Motel 6, Mysaria takes care of the hungover Daemon. Here we see her collecting payment from the boy who divulged those scandalous rumors to Otto Hightower. Maybe this is part revenge for what he did to her on Dragonstone. Either way, she is not happy with him. It also makes me wonder, how long have Mysaria and Otto been working together? The king awakens to the shocking rumor that her daughter and brother were caught in a pleasure house, quote, coupling, whatever that means. And Alicent creeps off to the side like,
I can't believe my fucking ears.
the king's first instinct is that this is all a lie, and he wants the eyes cut out of whoever created such a salacious rumor. But Otto won't divulge his source, saying this person has never led him astray. One little detail which I just absolutely love is how much more massive Viserys' model of the Valyrian city has gotten since we saw it in episode 1. Just check out the difference. The king then accuses Otto of besmirching his daughter's reputation, and Otto would have motive to do so. Even though the king has given birth to a male son, the son of a Hightower, Rhaenyra is still the king's chosen heir. And if you thought your morning afters were awkward, just take a look at Sir Criston, who's come to escort the princess to the queen. Having heard the allegations against her, Alicent has come to ask Rhaenyra of the truth. She knows the Targaryens have weird customs, but hooking up with your own uncle behind everyone's back?
I could not believe my ears.
Rhaenyra fires back, saying that to question her virtue is an act of treason, demanding to know who made such vile accusations. But when Rhaenyra finds out they're merely rumors that Otto heard, Rhaenyra swears on her mother's memory that her uncle never touched her, which is, of course, a complete lie. Rhaenyra also doesn't bring up the fact that she hooked up with Sir Criston. As Alicent points out, if the lords of the land were to find out she had been sullied, it would ruin everything. Daemon arrives back at the keep, looking like me when I come home after the bar. He's taken by Sir Harold Westerling and the Kingsguard to be brought before his brother to answer for these rumors. And in a complete twist, not only does he say they are true, but that he went all the way with his niece. But why would he lie about this? Later, in a conversation between the king and Alicent, Alicent claims he did this because it reduces the king. It makes him look bad. But we know that Daemon ultimately loves his brother, so I believe this tactic was more self-motivated. He wants Rhaenyra and even asks his brother to wed them. If he were to wed Rhaenyra, he'd become king consort upon her ascension. A match like this is not uncommon in the Targaryen family. Their parents, after all, were brother and sister. The king, however, sees past this, stating that it's not his daughter Daemon lusts for, but the throne. Their reconciliation's short-lived. He orders that Daemon never show his face around him again. Alicent informs the king of her talk with Rhaenyra, in which he states the princess remains a maiden.
So that was a lie.
Sir Criston leads Rhaenyra to her father, who, not ominous at all, heats up the cat's paw dagger. He tells her that before Aegon the Conqueror's death, the last of the Valyrian pyromancers hid his prophecy on the blade itself, only visible at extreme temperatures. This responsibility of handing down the Conqueror's dream, the Song of Ice and Fire, is larger than everything, even the throne, kingdom, and herself. Viserys notes that if Jaehaerys were king, he would have disinherited Rhaenyra even if the rumors turned out to be false. That's because, as Viserys says, the truth does not matter, only perception. It's basically the king's way of saying the only thing that matters is the court of public opinion. However, it will be interesting next episode if the king is able to quash these rumors or if they'll spread. If Rhaenyra were a man, she could have a dozen bastards and see whomever she liked, but as her father reminds her, she's not a man. It's not fair, but forget it, Jake, it's King's Landing. The king is fed up and tells her her courtship is at an end. She is to marry Laenor Velaryon and unite the two most powerful houses in the realm. But what is the king to do about the, quote, vulture who perches on his throne, Otto Hightower? He was the one who spied on the princess and tried to disgrace her. How can such a man who is so self-interested properly advise the king? Rhaenyra says she will do her duty as heir and marry Laenor if the king does his duty and cans the hand. Viserys brings in Otto to the small council chambers and tells him a story about how Otto became Hand. When Jaehaerys was king, his Hand was his son, Balon, or Viserys' father. In the book, Balon was Hand for 2 years before he died. However, the show version states that 5 days after a hunting trip celebrating him being named Hand, he fell gravely ill. This is odd because Balon was considered quite strong and healthy. And just who happens to be named Hand after Balon's demise? Otto Hightower, going from common lord to the second most powerful man in the realm. It's an insinuation that Otto may have been involved in the prince's death. Combine this with the very calculated move to put his daughter near the king during his time of mourning, a clear attempt to make her queen. Viserys knows Otto has overstepped his bounds and can no longer be trusted. The king removes Otto's pin, tells him the realm owes him a great debt, and removes him from his post. In the book, he is also removed as Hand, but more so because he kept hounding Viserys to declare Alicent's son heir to the throne instead of Rhaenyra. This leaves an opening spot for Hand of the King. In the book, we know who this goes to, but if I told you, that would be breaking the law. Hint hint. If you want spoilers, check out my next episode trailer videos, which usually come out within 24 hours of these breakdowns. Our final heartwarming scene of the episode occurs when our beloved Grand Maester Melos arrives with some special tea for Rhaenyra. Tea that would rid her of any unwanted consequences. Of course, we don't actually know if Rhaenyra is pregnant, it's only been a day, so this is a preventative measure should she be with child. Because this tea was sent on the king's orders, it also shows how much distrust he has towards his daughter. Now, if you want to find out what happens next episode and the fallout from all these rumors, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss my episode 5 preview video. Thanks for watching, everyone. For more bad takes, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at ThinkStoryYT. Until next time, remember...
This is risky business.